video, we covered the basics of running a wired light with wired DMX and what the different features of the board can do to control that fixture. One of the other options I'd like to show you now is what we addressed before, which is wireless DMX and using DeFi. So with a light like this, part of Chauvet's Freedom series, Freedom meaning that it's battery powered and technically it has the DeFi built in, is a true Freedom light. It is not constrained to a cable at all. It can be moved around and be controlled wirelessly and powered wirelessly. So, a brief rundown of Chauvet and their naming schemes. They have a really intuitive way of naming each of their lights so that you know exactly what it is and the basic information of it. Again, this is part of the Freedom series, specifically their Freedom Par series. This is a par styled light versus something like a baton light, which would be more like a bar, similar to in size to a light like this. And I have a much older light from them. This is the Color Dash Quad, and that would be more like a baton style light. It gets a much wider spread, as you can see, because it would be basically 4 pockets of lights versus this being just one. It has 4 quadrants. And then the hex part. The hex part follows along to how many colors it can do. A tri version of this light would only be capable of doing red, green, and blue. A quad version of this light would be able to do the red, green, and blue and maybe a amber or a white. So it would be RGBA or RGBW, depending on what that 4th color is. And then they have this one, the hex version, which can do red, green, blue, white, amber, and UV. The 4 indicates how many lights there actually are. There's 4 lights, so 4 little diodes, so that's where the 4 comes from. In the previous video, we demonstrated this light, which is part of their Slim Par series, a slim fixture, much slimmer than this Freedom series, but still part of that Par family, does the same job. This one's, again, the hex, can do all 6 colors, and this one is a hex 6, and the 6 being because there's 6 diodes. And this one indicates that it is IRC for that IRC infrared controlled remote with the, again, receiver lens right there. Now this one actually can use IRC as well. I don't think it came up in the video before, but right there is the infrared lens. So this light has one extra feature from that slim light, which is right here, the set trans receiver. So when you go into set trans receiver mode, you'll be able to adjust the DeFi settings. This is how these two listen and talk to the receiver here, or another light. This has the capability of being, again, a trans receiver, so it can transmit or receive, and can work almost like a router or a hub for lights that do not have DeFi built into them and are not wireless lights. This can be the router light so that you can make the jump wirelessly without having to run a cable, and then run out through the DMX out of this light to send the DMX to lights that don't have that with a wire. So it's nice. You get to run a lot of short cables to other lights and continue your daisy chain and avoid those initial long 50 to 100 plus runs. So DR channel, or CH, is shorthand for DeFi receive channel. And that means it's in manual mode when it says channel. The other version of this is AS. And AS means auto, which is like a auto select, and that corresponds here to the auto button here. Not typically used so much. It can be a little finicky to get this light to sync auto mode to this synced auto mode so that they can get to talking to each other. It's much easier to treat it like a walkie-talkie, and the analogy of a walkie-talkie, you know, hey, everyone go to channel 1. You set these to channel 1, this to channel 1, and everyone on channel 1 can now listen and talk to each other. So it's much easier to do. The only downside to that is you don't really know if that channel is clean. The auto feature does a bit of scanning to find the best available channel that is least congested and most safe to use, but they sometimes aren't able to tell you what channel that actually it is. They stay in auto. So you don't know which one that is, so you can go to manual later. What ends up happening with manual mode is if you find out that your lights are kind of bugging out and are having some ghosting issues and other things, you just need to change your channel. But if you had 30 of these, that means every single channel you'd have to go to. Fortunately enough, that doesn't happen very often. I've personally, since been using DeFi for about 3 years now, have only encountered it on 2 events, and they are noted venues that cell reception is terrible. They're kind of just steel trap boxes of terrible frequency, and even wireless microphones have their issues there. So they're just a whole kind of disaster when it comes to running anything wireless, not necessarily a fault on DeFi, but that's an issue and a give and take with using wireless lights is the freedom you get from not having to deal with cables. You have to now deal with networking issues and the concerns of wireless systems.